Hi everyone, it's John, and welcome back to my channel. It is March 21st, 2023, and it's been a good long time since I've shown you any new additions to my library here at home, and it's about time that I show you some things because things are really starting to add up. Between what I have here and the Princeton University Press books, which I still haven't shown you from the sale last month in February, and other things I want to show you from Princeton, I really need to get on the ball and start showing things so I can get them on a shelf and not have to worry about them anymore. So these are books that I have mostly found at my local library annex / library bookstore, but I'm going to start off with three that I got maybe a couple of months ago in January or so from Verso. Excuse me. I've talked about Verso a few times on the channel. They are a sometimes left of center, sometimes socialist, sometimes very far left publishing house that puts out a lot of different stuff: history, literary theory, feminist theory, geography, and just a lot of neat stuff. And I'm a member, so I get 50% off absolutely anything that they publish. But I think it was in January, like I said, they had a 60% off sale. So I just wanted to take advantage of a few things that I've been wanting for a while. And one extra thing that got me free shipping. So the book that put me over the top for the free shipping was the one I'll start with. It is Ernst Mandel's The Meaning of the Second World War. And this is it's short and sweet. It's a book in their Verso World History series. And it's basically an interpretation of the Second World War. How it started, why it happened. And Ernst Mandel was a communist, and so it's written with a certain sort of Marxist historiography in sight and in mind. But for anyone who's interested in a little bit of World War II historiography, this is a really approachable book, in length at least. I haven't read any of it. But for quarter four, if you're interested, Verso has some fascinating things to look at. And the two I was actually really interested in getting and wanted certainly 60% off on. This is The Invention of the White Race by Theodore W. Allen. This is the one-volume version of a book that they actually originally published in 2 volumes. And I think Theodore Allen also published in 2 volumes as well. But they came out a few months ago with a sort of a one-volume version of it. So I opted for this one instead. And the other one I wanted was also relatively new from Verso, and it is Georg Lukács's The Destruction of Reason. You might know Lukács as a literary theorist. He wrote a book back in the 30s or 40s called, oh goodness, I'm forgetting the name, but it's about basically the historical form of the novel. Lukács is another Marxist writer, and this particular book is a criticism of a lot of the European continental philosophy over the last 2 centuries, starting from, well, I want to say Hegel, and coming up through the middle of the 20th century. And it is sizable and very likely not for beginners, but I have a pretty substantial background in philosophy, so this is something that looked fascinating to me. Okay, so let me move on to the more general stuff. these are the library books that I found. One of them was Dan Jones's The Hollow Crown, The Wars of the Roses, and The Rise of the Tudors. So this is going to take us from, the 1850s through the 1850s, 1450s through the 1480s, with Henry VII, of course, being the first Tudor king, who finally sort of wins the War of the Roses. And this is one Dan Jones book that I did not know existed. Something I plan on starting tonight, actually, is his History of the Plantagenets, which a lot of people seem to be wanting to read as one of their books for Q2 of Historathon 2023. So I will also be reading it. It's been sort of handy and right there on my shelf, so easy to reach for. I've also seen this mentioned a couple of times. This is The Sleepwalkers, How Europe Went to War in 1914 by Christopher Clark. Pretty obvious title there, just a narrative history of stuff leading up to World War I. A nice literary biography of Rudyard Kipling. Excuse the cellophane there, or the glare. The Glass, the Shadow, and the Fire by Philip Mason. This is some economic history, which I hope is not too in the weeds, because I don't have nearly the background in economics that I do, say, in philosophy or the natural sciences. But this is a history of, it's a multi-volume biography of John Maynard Keynes. And I only found volume 3. This is John Maynard Keynes Fighting for Freedom, 1937 to 1946, which was the year of his death. And this is by Robert Skidelsky. Would have loved to found the other 2 volumes, but if I enjoy this one enough, I'll certainly hunt them down. Another possibility for much later in the year, but the first 3 months of this year have already flown by much faster than I would have. It seems like it gets faster and faster every year, but it'll be here before we know. This is The Bully Pulpit, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and the Golden Age of Journalism by Doris Kearns Goodwin. Doris Kearns Goodwin is just a pretty reliable, mainstream, popular historian. And I haven't read many one-volume histories of early 20th century American presidents. So it looks like a nice, sizable, interesting history. Every once in a while I get something and I'm not exactly sure why I got it, because I have another copy of it, and I sort of think to myself, why did I do that? Well, I think everyone lately has seen Herodotus in the landmark editions, but I saw this version from, this is Everyman's Library, in pretty much new condition, and it was $1 or $2. So I said, why not? It doesn't have, at least when I checked, it doesn't seem to have the maps or anything, but thankfully if I ever want to read this, I can supplement it with maps from the other edition if I need to, because why not make reading even more difficult than it has to be? So here's an Oxford World Classics version of Robert Louis Stevenson's South Sea Tales. This is just a book of some of the stories that he wrote when he finally decided to move at the very end of his very short life to the South Pacific. And most of these are sort of extended pieces, but there are a few that are just a few pages long. There are 6 stories in here. First one's 70 pages long, the second one's 30 pages long, and the last few are, or the last couple are just 2 or 3. So, I have always wanted to read books like Kidnapped and Treasure Island, but never really seemed to find good copies of them at that library store that I was talking about. But this looked like it was in great condition, so maybe this will be sort of an entree into Robert Louis Stevenson. And then I got this mostly because I'm interested in the timeline of the kings and queens of England, and to a lesser extent Scotland as well. But if not just for the author's name, this is the kings and queens of Scotland, England and Scotland, by the fabulously named Plantagenet Somerset Fry. How absolutely perfect is that? I'm living for it. And for that reason alone, for that name, it was worth the $1 that it cost. Had to get it. And it's basically just some very, very potted biographies of, it looks like every single, well, going back to what, I guess, yeah, there you have William the Conqueror. So, information you can probably just Wikipedia, but it's nice having a little thing like that. And then lastly, I had one of these. It's a trilogy by Rick Atkinson, who's another sort of popular mainstream historian, and this is his World War II trilogy. I think it was, oh goodness, it was one of these. I want to say it was Army at Dawn that I originally found. But this time I found all 3 of them, and I want to show them to you in order. This is Volume 1, Army at Dawn. The War in North Africa, 1942 to 1943. And it's the trilogy is called the Liberation Trilogy by Rick Atkinson there. Okay. And Volume 2 is The Day of Battle, the War in Sicily and Italy from 1943 to 1944. And Volume 3 is The Guns at Last Light, the War in Western Europe from 1944 to 1945. Now, if you know Peg's channel over at the History Shelf, you'll know she's a big sort of military history reader. Has entire videos of war history magazines, military history, and this looks like it's certainly military history centered. It's not cultural history, it's not political history. It's mostly battlefield stuff. That stuff I've never really gotten into, but they are popular sellers, and they seem really narratively driven and really good, and they seem to have good reviews, and maybe this will be something that sort of interests me a little bit more in that kind of history. I don't think I'll ever quite get to where Peg is, where, you know, she's all about the one particular soldier from the 143rd Infantry on April 2nd, 1723. You know, I can't get that granular with my history. I need some perspective, but Peg's all about it. Hopefully this will give me a little bit more passion for that kind of history, because it's just, it's something that's always really eluded me, but I would love to be turned on to it. Okay, well, 15 minutes isn't that bad. Hopefully you saw something you might like for Historathon later in the year, or just something you might like to pick up for yourself. And I will be back very soon, in fact, within the next couple of days with more books to show you some exciting stuff from Princeton University. And on the 1st of April, a pile of possibilities for quarter number 2, in which participants in Historathon 2023 are going to be reading books from the years 500 AD to 1500 AD. So look for that on the 1st. And until then, I will see you later. Bye.